When Americans think about treason or insurrection in the early republic, one name towers above all others: Aaron Burr. Not because he was convicted, but because his case defined just how hard it is for the United States to prosecute treason at all. Aaron Burr was not a fringe radical. He was, at one point, one of the most powerful men in the country. Born in 1756 into a prominent family, Burr was a Revolutionary War officer, a successful New York lawyer, a U.S. Senator, and ultimately the third Vice President of the United States under Thomas Jefferson. He was brilliant, charismatic, and deeply ambitious, but he was also politically isolated. After killing Alexander Hamilton in their infamous duel in 1804, Burr became untouchable in national politics. His career at the top was over, and that's when things took a very strange turn. After leaving the vice presidency, Burr traveled west into the Ohio River Valley and the Mississippi frontier. This was a volatile region at the time. The Louisiana Purchase was new, Spain still controlled parts of the Southwest, and loyalties in the Western territories were often divided between Washington, local interests, and foreign powers. Burr began talking, carefully, ambiguously, about a grand enterprise. What exactly was the plan? That question sits at the heart of the Burr Conspiracy. At minimum, Burr envisioned creating a new independent political entity in the Western territories, possibly including parts of present-day Louisiana, Texas, and Mexico. Some contemporaries believed he intended to detach Western states from the Union. Others thought he aimed to invade Spanish-controlled Mexico and crown himself ruler. Burr himself was deliberately vague, which allowed supporters to hear what they wanted and prosecutors to later fill in the blanks. What we do know is that Burr recruited men, secured boats, stockpiled supplies, and gathered arms. The size of the force is often exaggerated in popular accounts. This was not an army of thousands. Most historians estimate between 60 and 100 men at its peak, with additional sympathizers scattered across the frontier. It was small, but potentially expandable, especially in a region already restless and lightly governed. The critical moment came in late 1806 at Blennerhassett Island on the Ohio River. Burr's associates assembled men and supplies there, and this gathering became the government's central piece of evidence. President Thomas Jefferson, convinced Burr was guilty, issued a proclamation declaring Burr's actions treasonous before a trial had even begun. Burr was arrested in 1807 and charged with treason against the United States, the constitutional crime that covers levying war or adhering to enemies. This was unprecedented. Never before had the federal government prosecuted a former vice president for an alleged insurrection. The trial took place in Richmond, Virginia, and was presided over by John Marshall, serving as a circuit judge. What followed became one of the most important constitutional trials in American history. Marshall insisted on a strict reading of the Constitution. Treason, he ruled, was not about intentions, schemes, or inflammatory rhetoric. It required an overt act of war, and that act had to be proven by two witnesses. Crucially, Burr himself had not been present at Blennerhassett Island when the alleged military activity occurred. The government could show planning, it could show ambition, it could show suspicion, but it could not show Burr personally committing or being present for an overt act of levying war. As a result, the jury acquitted him. Legally, Burr walked free. Politically and socially, he was finished. He spent years in exile in Europe and returned to the United States a diminished figure, practicing law in relative obscurity. But the legacy of the Burr Conspiracy is far larger than Burr himself. This trial established a lasting precedent. Treason and insurrection charges in the United States require extraordinarily high proof. Suspicion is not enough. Intent is not enough. Even dangerous schemes are not enough unless they cross a very specific constitutional line. That standard, set in Burr's case, still shapes how the United States approaches insurrection, rebellion, and threats to the constitutional order today. Aaron Burr may not have been convicted of treason, but his failed conspiracy and dramatic trial permanently define the limits of federal power and the meaning of insurrection in American constitutional law.